Power announced itself in the silence that followed whenever someone dangerous walked in the way conversations dipped low enough to hide sins, in the way people who mattered were ushered through velvet curtains while everyone else pretended not to notice. It was the kind of restaurant where the lighting was dim enough to flatter the guilty, where the wine list had no prices because if you had to ask, you didn't belong here. And in the middle of it all, weaving between tables like a ghost woven of patience and exhaustion, moved Sabrina Fisher. At 23, Sabrina had perfected invisibility. It wasn't a talent she'd been born with, but one she'd cultivated, sharpened, and worn like armor. She walked softly. She spoke rarely. She kept her gaze down and her presence muted. Politicians didn't look at her. Tech billionaires didn't acknowledge her. Crime figures didn't bother to learn her name. That was the point. No one noticed the furniture, and Sabrina had spent 2 years mastering the art of being just that. She slipped her tray under a table, collecting empty glasses without interrupting the men murmuring over coded business deals. They didn't glance up. They never did. She moved on to the next table, then the next, her hands steady even though the weight of her life pressed constantly against her ribs. $80,000 in student debt, 4 years at a top university, dual degrees, 6 languages. And somehow, she was here, carrying plates for men who ruined lives over after-dinner espresso. But Sabrina wasn't here by accident. She placed a fresh bottle of Sangiovese on the service station and exhaled slowly. Catedral wasn't just a restaurant. It was a crossroads of power, political, financial, criminal. Deals happened here that never made the news. Secrets were traded here that could topple dynasties. One wrong sentence could crumble a corporation. One overheard whisper could expose a criminal empire. Sabrina worked here because she needed those secrets. Because one of them belonged to her mother. 5 years ago, Dr. Maria Fisher, an investigative journalist too brave for her own good, had vanished without a trace. No suspects, no leads, no closure. Just a cold case file no detective cared about and a daughter who refused to stop digging. And so Sabrina followed the trail to Catedral, the last place her mother had been seen alive. At least, according to a bartender who'd been too drunk to remember which night, or perhaps too scared to admit it. Sabrina gathered menus from a corner booth and continued her route, her movements silent, her thoughts anything but. She replayed her mother's voice in her memory, the one soft place inside her that hadn't hardened into survival instinct. Maria had taught her languages first, long before Sabrina understood what they unlocked. English at home, Italian for fun, French because Sabrina liked the way it sounded, and Sicilian. Sicilian had been different. Not school Italian. Not dialect. Ancient Sicilian. The old tongue, the one used by families who handled their feuds in blood. Languages are weapons, sweetheart, her mother had whispered over late-night flashcards. People lie in the ones they think you don't understand. Sabrina understood, too well perhaps. She lifted a tray of empty cocktail glasses, balanced it with the ease of someone who learned to carry weight long before she learned to carry plates, and slipped back toward the kitchen. Cooks yelled. Line chefs cursed. Dishes clattered. Invisibility was harder back here, but she kept her eyes lowered and her steps quick, making herself small. Fisher, the voice came sharp, clipped, and permanently stressed. Manager Anthony Morty looked like a man who survived on caffeine and fear alone. He always seemed to be sweating, even in the walk-in freezer. Sabrina stopped. Yes. Morty swallowed, tugging at his collar like the tie was strangling him. Romano party arrived. Her blood froze. Not a Romano. The Romano. Salvo Romano. The most dangerous man in Manhattan. The one people whispered about like he was a storm or a curse. Morty lowered his voice as if the walls themselves had ears. Private booth. His eyes darted around the room before settling on her. You're assigned. Sabrina felt her pulse spike, sharp, electric, cold. Assigned. To him. The tray trembled in her hand for the first time that night. And she knew, without a shred of doubt, that her life was about to change, whether she wanted it to or not. The wine cellar door closed behind her with a soft thump as she carried the tray up the velvet-lined hallway toward the private section. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, louder than the low hum of conversation spilling from the main dining room. Every step she took seemed to steady and sharpen something inside her. Fear and purpose lived side by side in her ribs, restless and waiting. Sabrina had never seen Salvo Romano up close. Most staff hadn't. He rarely visited Cathedral in person. His presence was dangerous enough that his shadow usually handled the reservations. Tonight was an exception, and exceptions in this place meant something was shifting beneath the surface. She passed the final curtain, and sound disappeared. The private section always felt like another world entirely, insulated from the city, from the law, from consequences. Candles burned low on every table. Heavy curtains swallowed the light. Bodyguards stood like statues at each exit, and in the center booth sat the man everyone feared enough to whisper his name only when necessary. Salvo Romano was younger than the legends, maybe 33, tall. His posture carried the precision of someone who learned early that hesitation could get you killed. He was speaking to two men in low, rapid Italian, his tone calm but edged with steel. His suit was charcoal black. His jaw was cut like it had been carved from stone. His eyes, when they flicked up, briefly took in the room as if scanning threats. He did not notice her. Not yet. Sabrina approached with the same invisible gait she used for every table. Smooth steps. No noise. No presence. She set the tray down gently. Her breath caught for only a second because this close she felt the weight of him. The room bent around his gravity. Even the air seemed tighter. She reached for the wine bottle, a rare vintage that cost more than a semester of her tuition, and tilted it with careful practiced movements toward his glass. And then the room betrayed her. A thread lifted from the carpet at the wrong moment. Her shoe caught. The bottle slipped. Deep red wine spilled like a slice opening across his immaculate leather shoe. Silence snapped the air tight. Salvo stopped speaking mid-sentence. His associate froze. One of the guards shifted and laid a hand against his suit jacket where a concealed weapon waited. Sabrina's breath locked inside her chest. Then Salvo looked at her. It was a cold, slow lift of his gaze, and it pierced through her like a blade drawn from a sheath. Her pulse stumbled. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. That would have been easier. Instead, he spoke in the thick, ancient Sicilian dialect she had not heard outside her childhood home, a dialect that carried pride and cruelty and old buried grudges. A stupid girl, clumsy, useless, he muttered to his associate while staring at her ruins, a man's shoes, because she has no brain. The words rolled out smooth and venomous, meant to humiliate, not confront. He expected her to crumble, expected her to lower her eyes and disappear. But years of silence, years of swallowing, hurt years of living with a hole where her mother once stood rose like a tide inside her. Something snapped cleanly, not with anger, but with certainty. She straightened her shoulders, placed the wine bottle down carefully on the table, and met his gaze head-on. And in flawless ancient Sicilian, she answered softly, but clearly enough to cut the air apart. "Sir, I understood every word you just said." The effect was instant. His face emptied. His hand on the wine glass froze. The entire room stopped breathing. For the first time in her life, Sabrina felt perfectly seen, not as furniture, but as danger. And she realized something even more terrifying. So did he. Morty's office door slammed shut behind her, and the sound echoed through the narrow hallway like a warning bell. Sabrina stood inside the cramped room while the manager paced back and forth, sweating through his collar as though the air itself was choking him. She waited without speaking because she already knew what he was going to say. It didn't soften the blow when it came. "You are fired," his voice cracked with panic. "You are absolutely fired, effective right now." Sabrina stared at him, steady, calm, something icy settling inside her. He kept pacing, pulling at his tie like he was trying to strangle the fear before it strangled him. "Do you understand what you did?" He hissed, his voice trembling. "You embarrassed Salvo Romano in front of his men. You don't embarrass that man. You don't look at him. You don't speak to him. You don't breathe in his direction without permission." Sabrina lifted her chin. "He insulted me first. And he's a mafia boss," Morty snapped, his voice rising. "And you are a waitress. There is no equal ground. You insulted him in his language. And worse, you let him know. You understood his private conversation. Do you have any idea what that means? It meant she had crossed an invisible line, one she could never uncross. Morty rubbed his forehead like the pressure might crush him. I'll tell him you quit. I'll tell him you moved across the country. I'll tell him you're dead. If that keeps this restaurant safe, you need to leave now before his men decide you knowing Sicilian makes you a threat. She should have been afraid. She was not yet. The shock was still too fresh, the adrenaline still pulsing through her from the moment she'd spoken those 5 words. She grabbed her bag from her locker, moved through the kitchen like a shadow, and stepped outside into the cold night air. 3 blocks from the restaurant, her phone buzzed, unknown number. She froze her thumb, hovering over the screen. Something told her not answering didn't matter. Whoever was calling already knew her every step. She answered. Miss Fisher, the voice was deep, calm, precise, the kind of voice used by men who didn't need to raise it to command obedience. My name is Luca. I work for Mr. Romano. Her pulse jumped. He would like to meet with you tomorrow at 10. The address is on the card he gave you. His tone was polite, but final, as if the universe itself had written this appointment in stone. I didn't agree to a meeting, Sabrina said quietly. It was not a request. Luca replied. Mr. Romano was impressed by your performance tonight. He has a proposition for you. What kind? The kind that pays well, the kind that requires your languages, the kind that concerns your mother. The world tilted, the sidewalk spinning beneath her. Her mother. No one knew about her mother, not outside police archives, not outside Sabrina's tiny apartment, not outside her nightmares. How do you even know about her? A pause, then the voice lowered as if stepping closer. Because Miss Fisher, Mr. Romano, has been looking into her for years. Her breath caught sharp and painful. Arrive at 10, Luca said calmly. Come alone. And Miss Fisher, one more thing, Mr. Romano does not extend an offer twice. If you refuse, you return to being invisible. Then he added in a tone that rattled through her spine. Except now, you will be invisible to a man who knows you are dangerous. The line went dead. Sabrina stood under the streetlight, the cold slicing through her thin jacket, the city roaring around her. But all she heard was her mother's voice from long ago. Languages are weapons, Sabrina, especially, the ones people think you don't speak. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. She would go to the address. She would face Salvo Romano. She would walk straight into the lion's den. Because fear was a language too. And she had spent 5 years mastering it. The building did not belong in Tribeca. It was too tall, too quiet, too private. No name on the door, no doorman, no intercom. Just a black steel entrance with a biometric scanner glowing faintly like an eye waiting to judge whoever dared approach. Sabrina arrived at 9:58, her hands cold inside her coat, pockets, her heartbeat louder than the distant traffic. She had barely slept. Every possible outcome had played through her mind during the night, and all of them ended with danger. Before she could raise her hand to knock, the door unlocked with a soft click and swung open. Luca stood there, broad-shouldered, sharp-faced, and expressionless as stone. He didn't greet her. He didn't offer a smile. He simply stepped aside like a gate opening for fate itself. Miss Fisher, Mr. Romano is expecting you. She followed him through a silent lobby into an elevator that rose so smoothly it felt like floating. No numbers on the panel, no indication of floors, only a single key slot, which Luca turned with a metallic click. The elevator climbed higher and higher until her stomach tightened. When the doors opened, she stepped into what could only be described as a palace hidden inside a skyscraper. The penthouse was a contradiction of glass, steel, and old-world treasures. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Hudson glittering beneath the gray morning sky. A small Caravaggio hung on the wall as casually as if it were a framed family photo. A Bernini sketch rested in a gold frame beside shelves of leather-bound books. Every piece was expensive, ancient, and chosen with meticulous intent. And standing in front of the windows, hands in his pockets, posture controlled and lethal, was Salvo Romano. He turned slowly, his gaze locking onto hers with the precision of a man who never looked away from anything he cared about. Morning light haloed him in sharp angles, shadows beneath his cheekbones, defining the fierce, quiet power in his expression. "You are punctual," he said, his voice low, steady, dangerous in its calm. You threatened to make me invisible if I didn't show, Sabrina replied, or at least attempted to keep her voice steady that seemed motivating. A ghost of a smile crossed his mouth before vanishing. You should eat something tells me you didn't sleep either. Are we here to discuss my eating habits? We are here to discuss business, Sid. She sat in a leather chair so soft it nearly swallowed her. Salvo remained standing watching her with an intensity that felt like an interrogation or an evaluation. You speak Sicilian, he said, without preamble, not modern Italian, not textbook. Dialect the old language, the kind spoken in my grandmother's village. My mother was thorough in her work, Sabrina answered carefully. She learned it for her investigation. Your mother was asking questions about my family, right? Before she disappeared, his tone sharpened. Just slightly, her vanishing did not go unnoticed. A cold tremor shot through her. What do you know about it? Enough to know you're not here by accident. He pulled a folder from a side table, placed it gently in front of her. Inside was a cashier's check, $500,000, and a photograph of a handwritten coded page. 3 days ago, a digital ledger was stolen from my organization. The man who took it left behind this message. Salvo tapped the image with one finger, a cipher written in archaic Sicilian. She leaned closer, reading the twisting lines of ancient script. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but recognition. You want me to translate this, she breathed. I want you to interpret it, he corrected. Translation is easy, interpretation is art. I need someone who understands history, culture, intention, someone who can think like the man who wrote this. Why me? Because you are brilliant, because you are desperate, and because your mother raised you to uncover truths people kill to protect. Her throat tightened. Then what do I get in return? Full access to the Romano archives, everything we know about your mother, where she went, who she met, who feared her. Her heart stumbled. And if what I find incriminates you, you keep it to yourself until the job is done. Silence stretched between them like a held breath. Then Sabrina walked toward the windows until she stood only a few feet from him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to smell cedar and danger clinging to his suit. I have conditions, she said quietly. I'm a consultant, not an employee. I work my own hours. You don't control me. And you don't change my interpretations because you don't like the truth. Agreed. I get full access to the file's copies too. His jaw flexed, but he nodded. And if I find something about my mother that you don't like? He stepped closer, closing the distance between them until his shadow merged with hers. Then you tell me anyway. Sabrina held her breath. The city stretched behind him, endless, cold, uncaring. But this moment felt like a line. She was about to cross a line she could never return from. Deal, she whispered. Salvo held out his hand. Take my hand, Sabrina. If we do this, we do it together. She hesitated, only once then. She placed her palm against his. His hand was warm, strong, certain. And the moment their fingers closed around each other, Sabrina Fisher realized she had just agreed to work for Manhattan's most dangerous man. And she was no longer sure who was more dangerous. Him, or the truth she was about to uncover. The elevator doors slid open with a sound too soft for the danger waiting beyond them. A cold rush of air drifted out from the hallway below, and Sabrina instantly felt the shift. The penthouse above had been polished elegance, but this floor was something else entirely. Industrial concrete lined the walls, silent security cameras blinked like watchful eyes, and the lighting was dim enough that the shadows felt alive. Follow me, Salvo, said, his voice lower, darker. Then before the real work happens down here. Sabrina stepped out, the air colder, sharper, scented faintly of metal and machine oil. The corridor seemed endless, stretching toward a steel door fitted with enough locks to secure a war zone. When Salvo lifted his hand to the panel, the scanner glowed red, then green. A hiss filled the air as the door unlocked and swung inward. What she saw inside didn't belong in a Manhattan basement. It was a control center, a bunker, an underground nerve system wired to an empire. Floor-to-ceiling monitors bathed the room in shifting light, each screen displaying maps, financial charts, encrypted messages, and surveillance feeds. Rows of servers hummed like a mechanical heartbeat. A massive wooden table sat in the center, its surface scarred, by years of desperate hands and dark decisions. This was not a workspace. This was a battlefield. And Salvo was its general. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the table. She obeyed, the room crackling around her like a storm waiting to break. Salvo placed a sleek laptop in front of her and opened a file that displayed the photograph he had shown upstairs. The coded Sicilian message written in terrified, shaky handwriting. "Marco Benedetti," he said quietly, "my financial officer. The man who stole the ledger. This was found in his desk 3 hours after he disappeared." Sabrina leaned closer, her pulse quickening. The text was dense, each line packed with proverbs, idioms, archaic phrasing, and cultural references that would confuse anyone who hadn't lived in the language the way she had. "He was scared," she said immediately. "Look at the way the letters shake. He wrote this fast while he was being hunted." Salvo's jaw tightened. "Someone forced him to betray me, someone who knows this language, someone inside the family." Sabrina began reading, scanning the lines, her mind clicking through meanings, patterns, and subtext. The first lines were familiar warnings wrapped in metaphor, but then she reached the middle. Her breath caught. Salvo leaned forward. "What do you see?" "This is layered," she whispered, "not just coded, but stacked like a puzzle. You can't translate it literally. You have to think like someone who grew up hearing these phrases from old people in tiny Sicilian villages." "So think like him," Salvo said quietly. "Uncover what he wanted us to find." Sabrina read line 5. "Why does this proverb appear here? The one that means who searches finds. But not always what they seek. That's not a location. That's a warning. He's saying you're looking in the wrong place, the wrong format." "Explain." "The ledger," she said, voice breathless. "You think it's still digital. But it is a proverb. Later talks about paper singing, fish not speaking. That means it's been printed, hidden physically, not electronically." Salvo stared at her, a flicker of something dangerous, admiration or fear. She couldn't tell. "It took my encryption experts 3 days to get nowhere. You cracked the structure in minutes." "I didn't crack it," she murmured. "I understood it. That's different." The tension between them tightened like a pulled wire. "Continue," Salvo said, but his voice had changed. It had lowered, softened just slightly. She kept reading, then froze suddenly at line 15, her spine stiffening. Salvo sensed it immediately. "What did you find?" Sabrina swallowed a chill, sliding through her. "This proverb is never used casually. It means blood does not turn into water, but betrayal stains it. Read someone with blood ties, someone in your family, forced Marco to steal the ledger." The air dropped 10 degrees. Salvo's expression turned to stone. "Who?" Another line answered her before she spoke. She lifted her eyes to his Cristiano. She whispered, "Your cousin, he fits every clue." Salvo's hand curled into a fist against the table. His cousin, a man who had always believed he deserved the throne more than Salvo, a man who had vanished conveniently from gatherings these past few weeks. He took a slow, steady breath that didn't steady anything. "Cristiano wants the organization, he wants the legitimate businesses, he wants everything." Sabrina felt her heartbeat slam against her ribs. "Then we need to find the ledger. Before he does, we need the rest of the message." She bent forward again, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached the last lines. Her breath caught entirely this time. "The treasure hides where death gives life," she whispered. "That's the final clue." "Where's that?" Salvo demanded. Her voice was soft, filled with dread and certainty. "A cemetery." Salvo's eyes sharpened, readying for war. Sabrina knew, without question, that everything was about to get far more dangerous than either of them had imagined. And she was already in too deep to turn back. Night fell over the safe house like a heavy curtain, hiding the world outside. The place was nothing like Salvo's penthouse. It was smaller, darker, stripped of luxury. Concrete walls, thick soundproof windows, steel-reinforced doors. A place meant for survival, not comfort. Yet the moment Sabrina stepped inside, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Safety was too strong a word, but maybe something close, something quiet. Salvo walked ahead of her, shrugging off his jacket, revealing a shoulder holster and the hard lines of a man carved from violence and control. He moved with purpose, opening drawers, checking weapons, making sure every lock and camera responded. Sabrina stood by the doorway watching him, and suddenly seeing the weight he carried, the vigilance that never left his eyes. "You expected an army of guards?" she asked softly. "I expected a quiet night," he answered, and for the first time since they met he sounded almost human. "You need space to think, space without bullets, space to breathe." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she followed him into the small kitchen where only a single warm light glowed above the counter. He reached into a cabinet, pulled out 2 plates, and began cooking. Not heating leftovers, not ordering food, cooking. "Sabrina stared. "You cook?" He didn't look up. "Someone taught me, once, before everything got complicated." There was softness there, buried deep enough that most people would never hear it. But she did. Salvo Romana wasn't used to being seen. She could feel that in the way his shoulders stiffened whenever her eyes lingered too long. She sat at the table while he moved around the kitchen with silent precision. Garlic hit the pan, and the air warmed slightly, the scent cutting through the cold weight of everything surrounding them. For a moment they were only 2 people in a quiet room, a man cooking dinner, a woman studying a cipher, but beneath the surface tension waited, crouched like a predator. "Tell me about your mother," he said without turning. Sabrina stiffened. "Why?" "Because I need to understand the mind that shaped you." She hesitated, then spoke. Her mother teaching languages late at night, her notebook filled with Sicilian proverbs, her obsession with uncovering corruption, her laugh, her fierce protectiveness, her sudden disappearance, and Sabrina's long, slow crumble afterward. As she talked, Salvo was silent, not interrupting, not analyzing, simply listening like her words mattered. He placed a plate in front of her, and finally sat down. Their knees brushed lightly. She didn't pull back, neither did he. "And your father?" she asked quietly. Salvo's fork paused, his jaw clenched. He was a man who believed fear was the only way to control people, a man who thought love was a liability, a man who kept count of favors and blood debts. And when he died, everyone expected me to become him. "But you did." "Not yet." Something passed between them, then soft, but charged, a recognition of wounds that mirrored each other. They ate in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. It felt like the calm before a storm, the last still moment before the world changed. When they finished, Sabrina returned to the cipher, spreading the pages across the table, studying patterns, proverbs, hidden intent. Salvo stood behind her, silent, a dark presence radiating heat. Without warning, he leaned forward, one hand resting lightly beside hers, his breath brushing her shoulder. "You missed something," he murmured, not correcting, but inviting. She read the line again, realized he was right, and their heads bent over the text at the same time, so close their cheeks nearly touched. The moment stretched, charged, electric. Before anything could happen, Luca burst through the door, breath-sharp voice tense. "Boss, we found Marco Benedetti." "Alive," Sabrina whispered, hope rising for a second. Luca shook his head. "He's dead, execution style, and there's more, a message carved into his palm." Salvo's voice lowered dangerously. "What message?" Luca swallowed. "Cristiano is coming for you, and for her." Sabrina's heartbeat cracked against her ribs. Salvo stepped in front of her, instinctively shielding her with his body. He whispered one sentence, so soft it almost didn't belong to a man like him. "You're not dying tonight, Sabrina." She looked up at him, and she knew without a doubt. He meant it. He would burn the whole world before letting anything happen to her. The cemetery gates groaned open under the weight of rust and forgotten prayers. Cold night air swept through the iron bars, carrying the smell of wet earth and old secrets. Moonlight spilled across rows of cracked headstones, casting long shadows that moved when the wind shifted, making everything feel alive, even the stones that should have stayed still. Sabrina stepped through first, her breath frosting in the air, her heart pounding against her ribs like it wanted to warn her to turn back. Salvo followed close behind, one hand resting near the weapon under his coat, the other steady at his side. He scanned every corner of the cemetery with the sharp, controlled precision of a man who knew ambushes better than he knew birthdays. Luca and 2 other guards fanned out, silently disappearing between the graves like ghosts summoned for war. "This place matches the proverb," Sabrina whispered, "where death gives life, meaning buried truths, meaning something hidden where the living rarely go." Salvo nodded. "Stay behind me. If Cristiano is here, we don't give him an open shot." She wanted to argue, but he was right. The air felt wrong, heavy in a way that pressed against her lungs. Sabrina moved closer, her fingers brushing his sleeve for balance or maybe for grounding. He didn't pull away. They reached the oldest part of the cemetery, where mausoleums leaned like tired giants and ivy strangled the stone walls. Sabrina stopped abruptly, her gaze locking on a weathered statue of an angel, its face cracked, its hands broken. There, Sabrina pointed, look at the base. Carved into the stone, barely visible under centuries of grime, was the Sicilian proverb from the cipher, the exact phrase Marco had scribbled in panic before dying. It was real, it was here. Salvo's breath shifted. You found it. Sabrina knelt, brushing dirt from the inscription. Her fingertips shook, not from fear, but from recognition. My mother used this proverb in her notes. She came here, Salvo. She was alive here long enough to see this. Before he could respond, Luca's voice cracked through the silence. Boss contact. East side, 20 meters out, movement. Salvo drew his gun, his body snapping into lethal focus. Sabrina, stay low, don't move until I tell you. But the cemetery erupted before he finished. The first bullet struck the angel statue, sending stone shards flying. Sabrina dropped, instinctively curling behind the base. Salvo moved in front of her, his stance wide, his gun raised, his eyes sharp with fury. Cristiano's voice rose from the darkness, mocking, cold, confident. I knew you'd come, cousin. Always did love chasing puzzles you couldn't solve. He stepped into the moonlight, flanked by armed men. Sabrina felt her stomach twist. Cristiano had Salvo's jawline and height, but none of his restraint. His smile was the kind men wore before cutting a throat. And you must be the girl, he said, turning his gun toward her, the one who speaks in tongues, the one who ruined everything by being smart. Salvo moved so fast the world blurred. He stepped in front of her, blocking Cristiano's aim. Sabrina grabbed his jacket, fear slicing through her like ice. Cristiano laughed. Don't be dramatic, cousin, move aside, and I might let you live long enough to watch her die. Sabrina's breath hitched. Salvo's voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. You touch her, and you die before the bullet hits the ground. Cristiano shrugged. Suit yourself then. The gunshot cracked through the night. Sabrina screamed, but the sound drowned beneath the thunder in her ears. Salvo jerked as the bullet hit him, not in the chest, but near his shoulder, still too close, too violent. His body staggered, but he didn't fall. Instead, he turned, firing with perfect aim, dropping one of Cristiano's men instantly. Luca and the guards burst from behind the mausoleum's gunfire, tearing the air apart. The cemetery became chaos, smoke, dust, muzzle flashes, and shouts. Sabrina crawled toward Salvo, pulling him behind a stone slab, while he gritted his teeth, holding pressure on his wound. Sabrina, he rasped, his voice rough, you need to leave, go now. I'm not leaving you, she whispered fiercely, hands trembling as she pressed harder on the bleeding. Cristiano shouted from somewhere in the darkness, bring her to me, she knows where the ledger is. Sabrina felt something inside her harden, a fire rising through her fear. She lifted Salvo's gun from his hand, her voice steady, for the first time since the night began. They're not taking me. And they're not taking you either. Salvo's eyes widened just slightly, with something like pride or fear or both. Stay behind me, he whispered. No, Sabrina said, tightening her grip, not this time. And they rose together, ready to fight the nightmare that had finally stepped into the light. Gunfire echoed through the cemetery until smoke crawled across the broken stones like a living thing. Every breath Sabrina took tasted like dust and fear, but something sharp had ignited inside her, something stronger than panic, something that refused to let her collapse. Salvo leaned against the stone crypt beside her, one hand pressed to the wound near his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. But his eyes stayed clear, sharp, focused on protecting her even while he bled. Stay low, he ordered, his voice strained. You move when I move. She nodded, gripping the gun with shaking hands. The weight of it terrified her, but losing him terrified her more. Luca's voice cut through the smoke on the left, firing at another of Cristiano's men. Shadows moved fast from grave to grave like hunters playing with prey. Cristiano's voice rose above the chaos. Come out, Sabrina. You don't understand what you stole from me. Bring me the girl, cousin, and I'll make your death quick. Salvo's jaw tightened. You hear that he wants the ledger. He thinks you know where it is. I don't, Sabrina whispered, but I know the next clue and he knows that. Salvo turned his head slightly, his eyes darkening, with realization. He's not just after me, he's after the legacy, the future, the entire empire. And your mother, Sabrina, whispered her voice, barely audible. Cristiano killed Marco Benedetti. He killed your officer, he might have killed her too. Salvo flinched, as if her words were another bullet. He pushed himself upright, despite the pain. Stay behind me, he said again. But Sabrina, did she moved beside him, her determination stronger than fear. Cristiano wanted to kill them. Because he believed knowledge was a weapon. She had been raised to believe the same thing. Now that belief might save them both. Movement flashed to the right. Cristiano appeared stepping from behind a mausoleum. His gun raised, his smile twisted and hungry. Well, cousin, look how far you'll go for a waitress, a girl who should have stayed invisible. Sabrina raised her gun before Salvo could stop her. Her arms trembled, but her aim did not. I'm not invisible, not anymore. Cristiano laughed, mocking, fearless. You think you can kill me, little girl? You think you're something because you speak like an old Sicilian grandmother. No, she said, I think I'm the only one who understands why Marco wrote those proverbs. I think I'm the only one who can finish what my mother started. His expression snapped from amusement to fury. He aimed his gun at her, and the world slowed until Sabrina felt her heartbeat stretching across time. Then a shot ripped through the air, but it didn't come from Cristiano. Luca had circled behind him, silent like a shadow. His bullet struck Cristiano's arm, forcing him to drop his gun with a howl of rage. Salvo lunged forward despite the pain, tackling his cousin to the ground. The two men rolled across the dirt, fists, flying boots kicking stone, cracking under their weight. Cristiano fought like a man who had nothing to lose. Salvo fought like a man who refused to lose her. Sabrina ran toward them, her pulse thundering. She grabbed Cristiano's dropped gun and pointed it at him. While the two men struggled, he froze only when he felt the cold press of metal against his temple. Get off him, she shouted, voice breaking. Cristiano slid his eyes toward her, breathing ragged. You want shoot me, you don't have the blood for it. Sabrina's hands tightened around the gun, but her finger trembled on the trigger. The weight of the decision crushed her chest. Salvo saw her shaking. He used that moment to flip Cristiano, pinning him beneath his knee enough. He growled, Luca, hold him. Luca and the guards seized Cristiano, dragging him across the ground. Sabrina dropped the gun and stumbled backward, her breath shaking. Salvo caught her wrist, pulling her into him, despite his own bleeding. You did good, he said softly. You stayed alive. She pressed her forehead against his chest. You saved me. He lifted her chin. We save each other, that's how this works now. But before she could speak, Luca approached, his expression grim. Boss, we found something on Cristiano, a second page, another proverb. Sabrina took the page, her heartbeat racing. The writing was rough, frantic, 3 lines written in Sicilian code. She read it silently, then felt her blood turn cold. Salvo asked quietly, what does it say? Sabrina looked up, her voice barely a whisper. It says the ledger is not the end, it's the beginning, and the truth my mother died for. Her knees weakened. Is still buried. And someone even more powerful is coming for it. The drive back from the cemetery felt like a blur of flashing streetlights and sirens in the distance. Salvo sat beside Sabrina in the backseat of the SUV, his shirt soaked with blood, his breathing tight, controlled only by sheer force of will. Luca drove in silence, while 2 guards followed behind them in a second car. The night felt stretched thin, as if danger clung to the air even after Cristiano had been dragged away in restraints. Sabrina kept her hands pressed to the wounded side of Salvo's shoulder, her palms trembling though she tried to hide it. He didn't flinch, not once, not even when the SUV hit a pothole. His eyes stayed on her, studying her with a quiet intensity she didn't know how to interpret. You are shaking, he murmured. You were shot, she whispered. So was I supposed to be calm? You stood up when he aimed at you, Salvo. Said you looked him in the eyes, you didn't break. I almost pulled the trigger on your cousin. He reached for her hand, not caring that blood smeared across their fingers. You didn't have to, but you were willing, and that matters. The SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath one of Salvo's lesser-known properties, a building without security logos or flashy cars, no hint of power, just a gray structure hidden in plain sight. Luca opened the door before the vehicle fully stopped. Inside boss now. Sabrina stayed pressed against Salvo, helping him out carefully. He leaned slightly on her as they entered a dim room where emergency medical equipment was already laid out. A private doctor hurried forward, but Salvo lifted a hand, not yet dismissing Sabrina. "Stay," he said quietly to her. She nodded, though she wasn't sure if her legs could actually move away even if he asked. The doctor began stitching the wound, while Salvo watched her from the exam table, his expression unreadable. When the doctor left the room, Salvo finally spoke. "Tell me again the part you didn't say in front of the others." She swallowed hard, the coded page still clutched in her hand. The new proverb wasn't just a clue, it was a warning so old her mother had once called it a curse disguised as wisdom. "The ledger was never your cousin's goal," she whispered. "It was bait. Someone else wanted you searching for it, someone bigger than your family, someone who needed you occupied." Salvo's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Sabrina hesitated, then met his gaze. "The proverb mentions the serpent who watches kings, the one who bites only after the kingdom is distracted. That serpent isn't Sicilian, it's from the Calabrian codes, the ones my mother studied the year before she disappeared." Calabria. Salvo repeated. "That means the Accardi syndicate." Sabrina nodded, her heart pounding. "They wanted your cousin to start the war. They wanted the Romano family to fracture from the inside. They wanted to weaken you, so you couldn't stand in their way." Salvo slid off the table despite the doctor's protest. Pain shot across his face, but his voice stayed steady. "So Cristiano wasn't the mastermind, he was the puppet." "A dangerous puppet," Sabrina whispered. "One that nearly killed you. But the Accardis, they are the ones who killed Marco. They might be the ones who killed my mother, too." Salvo paused, his breath heavy, as he studied her. "Sandra, if you keep going down this road, there's no turning back, no safety, no normal life." She stepped closer until her voice steadied again, even through fear. "I've never wanted normal, I want the truth, and we're closer now than ever." He reached for her hand, his grip firm, warm, unwavering. "Then you and I finish this together. I don't care who stands behind this. I will not let them touch you." Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the intensity in his eyes, the promise in his voice. Something shifted between them, then quiet, but undeniable, like a curtain lifting, revealing something that had been forming from the moment she corrected his Sicilian. Luca returned breathless. "Boss, Cristiano woke up. He's asking for Sabrina. Only her. He says he knows something she needs to hear." Salvo's jaw hardened. "He killed men who worked for me. He hunted her in that cemetery. Why the hell would he get to speak to her?" Luca swallowed. "Because what he said before passing out might be true. He claims your father was involved in what happened to her mother." Sabrina felt the floor tilt beneath her. Salvo froze as if ice had entered his veins. And the night, which had already been dangerous, sharpened into something far more lethal. The room where Cristiano was being held smelled faintly of antiseptic and cold stone. A single bulb hummed overhead, casting long shadows across the concrete walls. Sabrina stepped inside with a calm. She did not feel her pulse loud in her ears. Luca stayed by the door, silent and alert. Salvo remained outside despite every instinct telling him not to let her go in alone. She had insisted. If Cristiano had answers, she needed to hear them without anyone influencing the truth. Cristiano lay on a narrow bed, his breathing shallow, his shirt stained with dried blood. His eyes opened when he heard the door, and a slow, bitter smile touched his lips. "The smart girl," he rasped, "the one who speaks like an old woman from the mountains, come to see the monster die." Sabrina didn't flinch. "I came for the truth, that is all that matters." Cristiano laughed weakly. "You want truth, but truth is poison, little scholar. It ruins everything it touches." "Tell me what you know," she said, her voice steady. Cristiano's gaze sharpened. He pointed a trembling finger at her. "You think my cousin is your hero, but you don't know the whole story. You don't know what his father did, what your mother found, what she almost exposed." Sabrina's throat tightened. "What did your family do to her?" Cristiano swallowed, struggling for air. Then he whispered she wasn't killed. Because she found evidence she was killed. Because she found the wrong person, she wasn't hunting our books. She was hunting a traitor, a ghost. Inside our family, someone deeper, someone older, someone with more power than any of us. Sabrina leaned forward. Who? Cristiano looked past her toward the far wall, as if seeing something only he could see. My uncle. He said softly, the great Salvator, Romano the king before the king. Sabrina frowned. Salvo's father. Cristiano nodded. The man everyone thought was building an empire for his son. In truth, he was building it for himself. He planned everything, manipulated everyone. He used me, he used Marco, he used your mother. And when she got too close, he silenced her so his legacy could survive. Then he looked at Sabrina with eyes empty of hate. For the first time, he was the monster, not Salvo, not me. The old man died with his secrets. But someone kept them. Someone continued his work. Someone still wants the Romano Empire under their control. Someone who wants you out of the way, so Salvo stays blind. Sabrina's breath caught. Who is continuing his work? Cristiano coughed, blood staining his lips. His voice dropped lower, barely a whisper. His consigliere, someone you have already met, someone close to Salvo, someone who pretends to be loyal while waiting for the perfect moment. His eyes fluttered. Sabrina leaned closer. Tell me the name. Cristiano smiled, a ghostly smile. Too late. He is already moving. He thinks you are the weakness. He will go after Salvo. Next, he will take everything. Before Sabrina could ask again, his body went still, the last breath pushing out like a fading whisper. Outside, Salvo stepped forward. When Sabrina appeared, his eyes searching her face. What did he say? Sabrina took a breath, steady, but rattled. There is someone else, someone still inside your organization, someone who worked for your father, someone who killed my mother and Marco, someone who wants your throne. Luca looked between them. That is not possible. Everyone who served under your father was cleared. Sabrina shook her head. Not everyone. One man was always at Salvo's side. One man knew all routes, all accounts, all secrets. One man your father trusted more than his own children. One man who has been strangely quiet through all of this. Salvo's face turned white as ice. He whispered the name without Sabrina saying it. Giorgio. Luca swore under his breath. That man has access to everything. Salvo grabbed Sabrina's hand, his voice rough and urgent. He will go after what I cannot lose, and he knows that means you. We end this tonight. They raced out of the compound into the waiting convoy, but the moment they emerged into the open air, three things happened at once. The power to the building cut, plunging the garage into darkness. A single car engine roared to life from a hidden corner, and Sabrina's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The message held only one line. If you want Salvo alive, come alone. Before she could answer, the lights snapped back on, revealing an empty space where Salvo had been standing seconds before. Only the faint echo of distant footsteps and the metallic slam of a door told her what happened. He was gone, taken by the one man he trusted most. Sabrina felt a cold calm settle over her, the same calm her mother once used when walking into danger with nothing but truth as her weapon. Luca moved toward her, ready to act, but she lifted a hand, stopping him. I am ending this. She said, I am bringing him back, and I am finishing the story my mother started. Then she stepped forward, her voice low, steady, and burning with fire. We hunt Giorgio. And for the first time, she understood what Salvo once told her. Power is not in fear, power is in choosing to fight any. Sabrina Fisher had been invisible her whole life, but tonight she walked into the dark, not as prey, not as a scholar, not as a waitress, but as a storm, and she was coming for the man who stole her mother and stole her future. The ending was not death, not fear, not loss. The ending was Sabrina. And the world